All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Ryan. I work here at the museum in the programming department, and on behalf of our artistic team of Jonathan Batiste and Christian McBride and our executive director, Tracy Hyder-Suffern, we welcome you here this evening. How many of you, is this your first time here at the museum? All right, wonderful. Look at that. Cool. So it will not be your last time, right? We're excited to have you here. Always excited to welcome new folks. Tracy, our executive director, always points out that once you've come once, you're part of our family, and please come back anytime. We offer our space free for rehearsals and projects. If you're an artist and you're looking for a space to do some work on your project, please come hang out with us, let us know, and we're happy to provide our space free of charge. If you're an artist looking to present a showcase, your own music or a collection of musicians that you would like to present, we offer our space at cost, which basically means somebody to cover the front door and to clean up a little bit, a very inexpensive opportunity for artists to present at a very nice, we like it here. It's a nice space. We have professional sound and instruments, so please spread the word and take us up on that opportunity. This series, Music on the Brain, has been running for a number of years, and it's a collaboration between us here at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem and our friends over at Columbia University, specifically the Zuckerman Institute. And it's been a fascinating journey on looking at how music and the mind and the brain and the body are connected. And we've gone through a number of different sessions where we look at music and movement, music and emotion, music and rhythm, and every time we learn something new, and it's a great opportunity for us to put a neuroscientist together with a musician, and we come up with some really incredible opportunities. We will have some time for some questions at the end. When we start the questions, we will ask that you, even if you have, as somebody mentioned last week, they're from New Jersey, so they don't need a microphone. And I believe them, but we are live streaming the show as well, so it makes sure that everybody can hear it, and it makes sure people in the streaming universe can hear you as well. So we're really excited to get things started. We have a fascinating program for you. A big shout out to our friends at Zuckerman. I also want to acknowledge from Jazzmobile, Robin Bell Stevens. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have not been to a Jazzmobile event, you are missing out. And your summer series starts July 5th over at Grant's Tomb over on the west side. So, as well as a number of other programs, but make sure you keep in touch with what they're doing at Jazzmobile. So Robin, thank you for coming out. So we're going to get things started. Please welcome our musician for the evening, Mr. T.K. Blue.
Yes. Thank you very much. Maybe I should use Ryan. Maybe I should use your mic.
We're getting it.
Maybe I should use your mic. Hello? No, I know.
Is it on?
I know.
We're getting there.
Oh, we're getting there?
There you go.
Testing. Oh, here we go. Okay. Yes, I'm so happy Robin Bell Stevens is here, Jazzmobile. And in fact, everybody here better come to my concert. Robin has organized a show for me on the Charlie Parker Festival at Marcus Garvey Park. So I want to see everybody out there. And this is kind of a semi-sad moment because we lost a giant today, Mr. Harry Belafonte. And I had the opportunity to perform on a show that was produced by Danny Glover in 1990. A long time ago. I was 2 years old, and it was interesting because he wanted me to do a tribute to Miles, and then he had. I said, well, who else is on the show? Oh, just some friends of mine, In Vogue, Dionne Warwick, Barry White, Sinbad, and then he said, Oh, and Harry Belafonte. And Harry, you know, he spoke so eloquently, and he's a warrior. He's a cultural warrior, incredible artist, actor, activist. He was a heavyweight, so I'm really going to dedicate this evening to him, you know, to his memory. So we're going to get started, and we're going to play like different segments of music, and then we'll talk about it and see what the vibe is. Please welcome on the piano a dear friend of mine who's going to accompany me, Mr. Greg Murphy. If you ever see horn players do that, that's to warm up their horn because it's a little cold. And when your horn is cold, the tone goes down. Much. Thank you so much again, Mr. Greg Murphy. And I would like to introduce an incredible scientist, Dr. Mark Churchland. He's from the Zuckerman Institute in Columbia, and he's going to talk with us a little bit about his research on the brain and the music and how it affects us. How do we hear music, how we perceive music, how do we perceive rhythm, what makes one song more appealing than another, what makes one rhythm more appealing than another. Dr. Mark Churchland.
Wow, that was just fantastic. And I think, something probably most of you hopefully out there were feeling is the desire to move at various moments during both those pieces, probably in pretty different ways, actually. And, I don't think that I'm going to sit here tonight and try and say that we understand this, but there's obviously a connection between music and what scientists call your motor system. Motor just means movement. I guess it's Latin or Greek or something, but motor just means movement. So your motor system is the part of your brain that makes you move, and there's something about music and the rhythm of movement that are intimately intertwined in some sort of wonderful and mysterious way. And there's something wonderful about certain styles of music, and definitely the music that we just heard, that creates this very strong felt pulse inside of you that makes you want to move. And of course, not all music is like that, and there's lots of good music that doesn't make you want to move, but I think, we probably all feel that the stuff we like the most is the stuff that makes you want to move. And so the reason I'm here tonight is not that I know very much about music, but just that I study the parts of the brain that cause movement, and in particular that cause voluntary movements you choose to do or decide to do or are willing to consciously engage in. Yeah.
So, Mark, could you tell us a little bit about some of the research that you've done?
Yeah, so I mean, mostly what we do is we either teach people or train animals to play video games and that involve movement and very specific movements that for scientific reasons we think are going to be illuminating, and then record the neural activity during those movements. And you know, we could spend a couple hours on that, and we definitely don't want to. But I do have two quick slides to sort of illustrate a couple points. But maybe I'll wait until you guys have busted out a couple more tunes, and then I'll throw those up there.
Okay.
It's going to be one part of the brain that's sort of keeping track of the beat, but only the beat. It'll be like a part of the brain that's like a dancer that can find the beat but doesn't know where they are in the phrase, which is better than nothing, right? So and then another part of the brain that's keeping track of a repeating rhythm on a longer time scale. You know, 4 in the first case, and I guess I was 6 in the second. It was a tricky one for me, but yeah. But it's keeping track of the beats across a whole bar, and then it repeats every bar, so it knows at least where it is in the bar. And of course, you know, there's some part of the brain that's keeping track on even longer time scales, and you'll have to have somebody else back some other night if you want to hear about that.
Wow. Yeah, I'm always fascinated when I think of rhythm and how people respond to rhythm. It's very fascinating because, you know, I've had some really interesting experiences in my career. I can remember the first time I went to Africa was to West Africa, to Senegal. And it was I was performing, I was fresh out of college. In fact, I went to Columbia. I got my master's there, and I was lucky to land a job with the NEA jazz master, Abdullah Ibrahim, who's from South Africa. And so he said, okay, man, we're going home. We're going to Africa. And I had never been to Africa. But here's the thing. We performed of course, in Dakar, which Dakar is more cosmopolitan. It's a big city. It's the capital, especially at that time. But then the second concert, we played in a small town called Kaolack, which is south of Dakar. And we were in this kind of amphitheater, and we started off a song. They introduced us, everybody clapped, it was packed. We started with a song that was recorded on, it was my first recording ever. It was on a record called The Journey, Curious Girl Records. And believe it or not, early in my career, I used to play oboe, which I regret giving it up. It's just I have too much to do. So, but the oboe, it was featured on this song, and this song is in 9/4. And when we started playing this song, I am not exaggerating. Everyone in this theater got up and went to the exit immediately. It was like almost like they had practiced it. Everybody got up and went to the exit, and so I stopped playing, and I looked at Abdullah, and I said, what do we do? So he said, quick, Sister Rosie. So he stopped playing that song, and Sister Rosie is a calypso. Like, you know, St. Thomas, soon we started playing this Sister Rosie, everybody stopped, they listened for a second, they went, sat down, and they started clapping. Now, I can't figure that one out. I don't know if it was the 9/4 that turned them off. Was it the oboe? I don't know. But that's just something I was always thought about rhythmically, why this, you know, happens. So there's some cultural things going on, and which I find very fascinating. Have you done any kind of research on that level as far as culturally? How do different people respond to different rhythms?
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't, you know, I'll try and be very clear tonight about when I know something and when I'm just speculating.
Sure.
And, I mean, I think the one thing where the speculation seems fairly solid is I think, you know, things like 2, 3, 4. That's very easy for almost anybody to hear, probably because those are the basic building blocks of movement, right? You walk, that's 2. I'm not really sure why 3, but somehow 3 works. I don't really know. I can't really think of a movement that's in 3, but somehow we all sort of perceive 2, 3, 4 pretty well. Maybe it's heartbeat or something. I'm not really sure, but certainly so much of our natural movement is rhythmic. And even sometimes when you don't realize it is, like you're making a quick reach, like that's not rhythmic. But your muscles underneath, they do have a rhythm. They're going burst, pause, burst. So maybe that's where the 3 comes from. And then there's these more complex rhythms that are often built from these simpler rhythms.
Right.
And something you have to have heard them in order to hear them.
Yeah.
And if you haven't heard them in the past, it's hard to perceive them. And maybe
hard to feel them.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I remember once playing at a wedding in Baltimore, and the couple that was getting married, the bride, she's African American. The groom was from Palestine, and so very interesting. So I was playing. We hired us to play basically R&B, funk, dance music. We're at a wedding, and I noticed whenever we played our R&B, and we played the songs that were popular at that time, all of the Palestinian contingent that was at this wedding, they sat down. They didn't dance, but the African Americans were all partying. And then when we stopped playing on the pause, they put on tape music of Palestinian music, Middle Eastern music, with the oud, different things like that. And all the African American people sat down, and all the Palestinians got up and they were dancing. So it's very interesting how, I guess culturally, I think it does have some type of effect of how we perceive rhythm and melody. One thing I'll say, though, about jazz is it's quite universal, because I've played jazz, like this tune that we played, opening tune, Moanin'. You can play that song almost anywhere in the world, and people are going to tap their foot. And that's what I find really very interesting, how jazz seems to traverse the borders. And I did several State Department tours in Africa, and anytime we played some shuffle beat or the blues or swing, and the people would go crazy. So as opposed to, very interesting, as opposed to playing something more avant-garde. And I remember performing one time in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso. It was a great show. People went crazy, screaming, encore. And we played, like I said, we played shuffle beat. And after the show, I had this one gentleman come up to me and says, "Yeah, man, music was okay, but I wanted to hear some Coltrane and Ornette Coleman, and I wanted to hear stuff more cutting edge, and I wanted to hear some free jazz." I said, "Listen, man, I appreciate what you want to hear, what you like. However, did you see the reaction of those folks?" and I'm quite sure, had we played some free jazz, I don't think that reaction would have been the same. Now it would have been that reaction to free jazz avant-garde, probably in many places in Europe where I played in festivals, that might be very apropos, might be very relevant to that area. But in the continent, it's very rhythmic, and once you have something going on rhythmically that they can feel the pulse, that's, I think people really agree, and they really feel that. So you want us to continue? We'll play another.
Please,
We're gonna play another 2 selections, different rhythms, and then we'll have some reaction, and and then Mark is going to show us some very interesting things that he put together on the screen dealing with rhythm. Thank you very much. So we actually, so far, we played 4 different tempos and rhythms. The first one was kind of a medium shuffle, what we call shuffle, moaning, and then we went into a 6/8, and then we played a bossa nova, which is indicative of Brazil, and then we played some bebop. So just interesting to know. We'll ask after, you know, I want Dr. Churchland to speak a little bit, but we'll check after your reaction. What things, maybe one song you might have felt more than the other, maybe one touched you more than the other, maybe one allowed you to feel more of a rhythmic groove than the other. I'm not sure. I would be curious to know your reaction. So Mark, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the research that you prepared for us, and we're going to see on the screen.
Yeah. I got to. I was going to go right into that, but some of the things you're saying, I just got thoughts spinning in my head. I want to spit a few of them out. So, I mean, I think one of the things you were kind of getting at, I mean, I'll put it in different words, but it really has to do with the nature of knowledge and understanding. And you know, we think as scientists, we tend to pretend, or even worse, believe that knowledge is just things you can put in words or write on a page or make a drawing of. But knowledge doesn't just do that, right? It changes how you perceive, how you see, how you hear. You don't see or hear the same when you understand something. And that's true of scientific understanding, and it's at least as true of artistic understanding. And a lot of the time that knowledge has to be built up over time. And so something like that was a Charlie Parker tune, the last one, yeah? Yeah, like, you know, like if you had to come in cold and you've never heard jazz before, like that's going to be, you don't even know where the phrases begin and end, that's going to be hard. But like if you've had that knowledge built over time, you've listened to a lot of swing jazz, you've listened to bebop before, then it's like you have a framework that allows your ear to hear what's in that. And I sure notice that in myself when I can and can't hear something or latch onto something. It's usually, and you were getting at this earlier, it's about familiarity. Have you built up that sort of internal understanding? And so maybe in the end that is a segue to my slides, which I have to say, I'm not going to ask you to understand any of this. You can treat it like art for tonight, which is basically all it's going to be. But we've got data from 2 different brain areas, and one I would say understands where the beat is, but nothing more than that. And this is the primary motor cortex. So it's the part of your body that sends long wires, we call them axons, down to your spinal cord. And you probably think of neurons as being small things, right? These are not small things, right? They're this long, right? They're, at least the ones that go down to your legs are, right? The ones that go to your arms are like this long. But so they're big neurons, and they live in this brain area. And this brain area is very concerned with the movements you're making right now, and sort of for maybe at most the next half a second, right? But it's not really looking ahead any more than that. So it has knowledge of the beat, but it wouldn't know where you are in the phrase.
Does it control your movement?
100%, yeah, absolutely. In fact, if you injected a tiny amount of current into this brain, which they do in human patients in the operating room, the arm just immediately moves. Yeah, I've even had it done to myself before using a special device. Yeah, absolutely. It's very easy to evoke movements of the body because it talks basically directly to the muscles. So, like I said, it's just going to kind of be art. This image that you're going to see on the right here is made from real neural activity. So this is real data, but I'm not going to bother explaining why it looks the way that it does on the screen, because for today it doesn't really matter. But I've set it to music, and conveniently, because I know TK has something in 7 coming up at the end. In fact, it's a really beautiful piece in 7 that has, I think, one of the easiest to hear sort of 7, I don't know what to call it, rhythms, something like that. 7/4 meter. It's a beautiful, yeah, I mean, it just sounds very natural, even though it's an unusual meter. And so I picked the most easy to find 7 pop song in order to, it's not as sophisticated as what you're going to hear in the moment, but many of you will recognize this song. And the downbeat's on the right, right? So just cares about the beat, doesn't know anything more than that.
So when you say it knows the beat, it knows each pulse.
It knows each pulse. This is not actually, I am romancing this story a little bit. This is really an animal that's making a rhythmic movement. And in fact, it does it 7 times, which is perfect to tap into your 7/4. But from watching this video, you wouldn't know that because it doesn't care whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. It just repeats every beat, as you just saw.
I see. Gotcha.
So then you've got this other brain area so the brain area I just showed you is primary motor cortex. So it's right here. It's the one with the long axons. There's this other area, supplementary motor area, that talks to your primary motor cortex. So if you get a lesion in your primary motor cortex, like that's bad. Like your arm's going to kind of hang there and not do much. If you get a lesion in this area, the supplementary motor area, there'll be a few weeks when you can't tie your shoes, and then things will mostly get better. So it's sort of, it's other brain areas can kind of take over for it, but it's the brain area that's most involved with sort of keeping track of sequences of movements that might last 5, 10 seconds. So you'll see this brain area does know the difference between beats 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 7. And I'll just let the data speak for itself. So every 7, it's going to repeat, right? So you would always know if you were this brain area where you are in the bar.
You would know where the beat 1 is.
Yeah, exactly. And so presumably somewhere else in the brain, there's an area that's keeping track of things in even longer time scales, the time scale of a whole phrase. Yeah.
Wow, that is very fascinating. Do we have any questions? I should have asked that even before. So far, please. Could say again?
9/4.
Oh, what about 9? What about 9/4?
Play a few bars of 9/4.
Play a few bars.
Or hum them.
Okay. So let me see. So the journey. ding doom gong ging gong gong. That's 9. Yeah, and then it's interesting too because there's another song of mine that's on a recording, a Warm Embrace, and there's a thing called Dance of Love Everlasting, and the bass line goes like dong gong ding dong gong gong dong gong ding ding dong gong ding dong gong gong dong gong ding ding dong gong ding dong gong gong dong gong ding ding dong. So that's like 5 and 7. But so it's Say again. Dong gong ding dong ging gong dong gong ding ding dong gong ding dong ging gong dong gong ding dong gong ding dong. The first one is 7, and the second one dong gong ding is 5, and you put them together, and then so you you put them together to 75, and then you get. So here's the thing. Let me just say this. I was doing a workshop years ago, and Michael Carvin, the great drummer, he was also one of the clinicians, and we had a break, and so I went to the piano and I was playing that bass line. So I was asking Michael, I said, what would you play on that rhythm? And he said, very simple, man. He said, play it again. And he played a beat that it was solid. He didn't, how can I explain? He called it the walking man beat. In other words, he played a pulse that was like that across the 5 and the 7. And it worked perfectly. Now, there was some periods in that when he was playing that pulse where you felt some tension. You felt like it wasn't really locking, but when the cycle came to the end, he was right there. So it's very interesting. So he was saying to me, sometimes you as a drummer, you don't necessarily have to be explicit in your interpretation of the meter, but that you can actually subdivide that meter and you can find a pulse that goes through that meter. And another example, we played, the second song we played today was in 6/8. Now, 6/8, as we played here, is not the same as they played in Africa. And I can vouch for that because I played with many African groups when I lived in Paris, and they had songs in 6/8, but man, I couldn't feel it because their 6/8, it was a different. I can't explain it. It got to the point where I had said, "Look, I can't count. I can't. I have to just feel it because trying to count it, because the way they make the accents." And the way that they emphasize certain beats within that 6/8, it's a little different from the West. So that's also cultural differences between the musics of different people. So it's just very fascinating. But does anybody else have any questions on some of the rhythms and some of the things we?
You showed those graphs. Were there animals making motions?
Exactly.
So those graphs were showing the motions, like what were the animals and what were they doing for their motions?
So the animals in this case were monkeys, and actually this monkey's name was Balboa. He's presently retired in Texas, and his job, which he did almost every day, was to cycle through a virtual environment. So imagine like something out of a video game, and stop various places to get juice. And he's very good at it. And so he moves very quickly. So he's starting on a spot where he just got juice, and a new spot appears in the future. And he knows the rules of the game are you're not allowed to move to the next spot until it appears. And it appears in the future. It could be 1 cycle away, 2, 4, or 7 cycles in the future. So if he sees that thing 7 cycles in the future, he knows that it's 7 cycles. He's seen this a million times. He's really good at it. And he goes cycle, 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 cycle at about 2 hertz, so that's about 120 beats per minute. That's a nice rhythm, a very danceable rhythm. And he goes at 120 beats per minute. Takes him about 4 seconds to get 7 cycles. Then he stops there, gets his juice, and then the whole process repeats. And the graphs you're seeing are not graphs of behavior, although they're obviously related to the behavior as you intuited. they're actually graphs of what the neural activity is doing. And how I get from the raw recordings of the neural activity to what you actually saw in those videos could fill another 45 minutes, and we don't want to do that. But just sort of, you'll have to just trust me that those pictures are they are real data, and they are a nice way of visualizing what the neural activity is doing. So like when you see it going around the circle, that means that neural activity is perfectly repeating. It's just doing the same thing again and again. Yeah.
So they're they're moving to the rhythm.
It's their own internal rhythm in this case. Yeah, we don't impose any rhythm on them. So maybe that kind of ties into the theme of tonight, right? Which is he just naturally adopts a 2 hertz means 2 times per second, so 120 beats per minute. He just naturally adopts that rhythm, and he's very solid at it. I mean, he'll be very close to that every single time. He doesn't have to be. He can go slower or faster if he wants, but yeah.
If he were here,
Yeah.
would he be like tapping his foot or hand to the rhythm that TK and
Yeah, see, that's a great question. As far as we can tell, most
he'd be right on it, right?
the only animal I've ever seen kind of like to the music is a parrot. Yeah, and maybe there's a couple more, but I'm guessing that our special connection between movement and sound and music has something to do with the fact that we use language. But that's a guess, because you don't. Somebody did do an experiment once where they gave monkeys different choices of music. You know, they could press different buttons. They didn't care that much, and apparently country got pressed a lot. So I don't know what to say about that, but but they didn't seem to have strong preferences. They liked making noise, but I think they would have pressed buttons for any interesting sounds. So yeah.
You know, interesting. I had a dog, a little Maltipoo, mixed of Maltese and Poodle, for about 11 years. Diva. Sweet little dog, you know, she made her transition a few years ago. But I remember, it was really funny, when I'm practicing at home, she would, only when I played long tones, you know, when you play wind instruments, your basic warm-up is called long tones, where you hold a note for maybe 12 beats, maybe 16 beats, as long as you can. That builds up your armature. And whenever I played long tones on the saxophone only, the alto, she would come run right up in front of me and go, ooh. But only when I played the alto. Soprano, she didn't care. Flute, didn't care. So I don't know if it's a question of maybe the timbre of the instrument. Maybe there was something in the alto that, because you know when you play music, there's some physical vibrations that come, sound. Excuse me? Did it feel good to her? It must, because she didn't seem like she was complaining. She would stand in front of me, and she would sing her long tones. Ooh, she would try to hold it as long as I was holding my note. It was, you know, and she kept doing it while I was doing the long. As soon as I finished the long tones and I'm doing technical stuff, she just walked away. I don't care about that stuff. All I want to do is long tones. You know. Do you have any other questions about anything? Yeah, please. Let's.
What do you mean by conference?
What? Could you say it louder, please?
What do you mean by conference?
Conference.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the question. What do you mean by?
Do you have any knowledge about the process of the cortexual development for entrainment in utero? In utero.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously the brain is, it's sort of obvious, is undergoing huge amounts of development in utero. The cortex, though, is not yet receiving any information about sound until after you're born. So, you know, there are deep subcortical parts of your brain, older parts of your brain that are, but, you know, that's why when your baby's born, right, they check for sound sort of down here, not up here, because actually the information doesn't even get to cortex until after birth. The connections just aren't there. So, yeah, I'm afraid if we're hoping to sort of, change our baby's development by playing them music in the womb, and I can't rule it out, but my guess is probably not. Yeah.
Is that only for entrainment, or is that for all sound?
Yeah, sound does not reach cortex until after birth. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
All the experiments where babies turn towards their mothers, newborn babies when they hear their
Yeah, that's a great question. There are basic old orienting responses that don't depend on cortex. In fact, if TK makes a really loud sound, I'll do this, and that's not my cortex doing it. That's the part of the brain that even lizards have, and it's fast and it's very automatic, right? I'm not even choosing to do it. He makes a loud sound, and I'm TK, what's going on? So yeah.
Thank you. There have been, I always say now, studies ad nauseum almost about talking about the lack of art and cultural, specifically music, in certain school districts. Let's just say, the Harlem School District, formerly District 5, where there is little, if any, art programming at all. And they're finding that the students that are in those schools where there is lacking the art and culture, specifically music, their statewide exams, for example, both verbal and math, are much lower than schools that have any kind of basic music and art programming. And my late father was a bass player, and he also happened to have been, I didn't get all of his brains, unfortunately, but let's just say he had an IQ that was pretty high. But he was very good in math and very good in music. And if my dad was alive today, he'd be 102, so let you know how far back we're going. But he always believed, so back in the 40s, I guess, when he was at university, he believed he was so good in math because he was so good in music and vice versa. So can you talk a little bit about what the parallel is?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it is widely believed, and I think the evidence is there, though I'm not really the person to speak to this, but it's certainly widely believed that there's a connection between being good at math and good at music. And I can certainly say that musicians seem to be very overrepresented in my group of science friends. Me, unfortunately, I mostly didn't inherit this ear is not all that good, but it may have something to do with ability to picture or hear things in your head is very useful in for both of those things. I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Yeah,
with
well,
you,
I think the first connection, especially with math and music, is 'cause music. There's math involved because you're dealing with intervals, so and you're dealing with inversions. So when you're studying, especially when you're studying, for example, voice leading. In classical music, you study voice leading and chorales and things like that, and you're dealing with intervals and different types of inversions. It's primarily all math. How large the intervals should be, because during the classical period in Europe, they had many rules and regulations to get the sound of the Baroque period, to get the sound of that style of music. And they were formulas, so you couldn't use parallel, for example, one period you couldn't use parallel fifths when so math is so integral in music, and then you have the scale, the steps of the scale, C going all the way up to C, and then you have chords. So if I'm gonna play a C seventh chord, so I'm playing a C, E, a G, and a B flat, and I have to know the intervals between, how many steps are between C and E, how many steps are between E and G, how many steps are between G and B flat, and that gives you the sound of a dominant chord. Now, if I wanted to play a major chord, it would be a B natural, so that's another step added. So the math equation and music, they really are very, very similar, and I think they're very connected, and I think that's probably why musicians who study music in school excel in math, tremendously. Somebody else had their hand up? Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm curious if your research has taken you into the realm of basal ganglial bypass for like Huntington's and Parkinson's to use music to sort of override the involuntary motions.
Yeah, let's talk afterwards. I'd be curious about your thoughts. Yeah, I mean, we've just recently started investigating the basal ganglia, so I don't have anything intelligent to say, but we could definitely maybe have some fun discussing it. And definitely I'm glad you brought up Parkinson's, because it is one of the applications of our research. Yeah, and unfortunately my father-in-law was just diagnosed kind of by me, because his own doctor got it all wrong. And my wife and I looked at him at the middle of COVID and we're like, he's got Parkinson's, and he did. So, that is one of the applications of our research. But I'm intrigued by your question, but let's take it offline. Yeah.
We've been sort of testing it anecdotally.
Yeah, let me know to come up to find me afterwards. I'd be curious to hear, yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions that we might have? One thing, too, that I noticed, for example, in Morocco, they have a thing called lilas. And lilas is it's a secret ceremony. You have to really be invited. You have to know somebody to get invited to these ceremonies, because they're very secret. And it's music, very specific music that's involved in these ceremonies. Sometimes they're playing an instrument called the hajouj. It's like a 3-string instrument. They have the tabul, which is a type of drum, but they play music, rhythms, predominantly, that are captivating, and it puts people in trances to the point where there's video footage shown where you have folks who are in these ceremonies to these rhythms that they're playing. They're moving. The rhythms is causing them to move and dance in a very, very agitated manner, to where they literally, some guys have taken knives and cut their skin, and there's no blood. And it's hard to imagine that. Yeah, they've taken knives. One guy stuck a spike through his cheek, through the other hole, and he's still dancing, because, and I'm always curious to know, I mean, that the music must also affect some area in the brain that deals with pain, because to do something like that and not feel pain and still be dancing, it's quite remarkable. So there must be something in the brain with the music that can maybe block the neurons that react to pain.
Yeah, I don't know. I just hope that's not going to be your last number.
No.
I'm nervous now.
No, but I'm sure many of you have seen or heard of people dancing on fire. Same. I just saw some footage of that last week in Africa. They had a thing, and they had the hot coals, and the guy was dancing, but there was drumming. What I noticed anytime these things happen, it's never just by itself. There's always some rhythm going on. It was some drumming, and he was dancing on these hot coals. And there was another video I saw online of a guy not only dancing on hot coals, but he was literally dancing in the middle of a fire. He was standing in the fire, and you could see the flames, and he's dancing. And how is it that he doesn't get burned? It's just fascinating. I don't know. So I think we're getting near the time. I'm going to play this last song in 7/4, and we'll close with that. And also, I want to mention. I think it's very important to mention this, because we're in Harlem, and my dear sister Robin Bell Stevens is here, and I am a student of Jazzmobile. I went to Jazzmobile when I was in NYU when I was in college. I went to Jazzmobile religiously. IS 201, 127th Street. Yeah, that's right. That's where I studied. That's how I learned how to play. And Jazzmobile would have the top of the top of the top jazz artists, innovators, there teaching for free. So please go to their concerts, support Jazzmobile, because they do extraordinary things for students. And I'm a former student of Jazzmobile. I'm very proud of that. that I was able to go to Jazzmobile. And also I want to mention that there's a gentleman here who we're going to be playing together the day after tomorrow. Please give a hand for Mr. Sharp Radway, the pianist. I see him in the back there. And just FYI, we're doing a tribute on Thursday. It's also connected with the Jazz Museum. We're doing a tribute on Thursday to a great figure in jazz who most of the history books have left out, Mr. James Reese Europe. He was the head of the 369th Harlem Hellfighters Regiment during World War I. He based in Harlem. Of course, you know the Army was segregated during that time. And they took the 369th, went to France. And in the day, they fought with the French against the Germans. And at night, they played a form of ragtime. And that's the first time that jazz was heard outside of America. That's why today, if you go to France, they have so many jazz festivals. You know, I lived in France for close to 10 years, and there's jazz festivals in every town, in every village, because of James Reese Europe, a very important figure. We're going to do a tribute to him, and I believe it's free. It's going to be in Brooklyn at the Black Veterans for Social Justice on Willoughby Avenue in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. It's going to be at 6 o'clock, 6 to 7 on Thursday. Sharp will be on piano, and we're gonna play music that was composed by the great Dr. Randy Weston, NEA jazz master, and I did the arrangements for him. It was originally composed for a 9-piece orchestra with saxophone, trombone, tuba, banjo, percussion, drums, piano, bass. Incredible compositions. So please try to come out if you can, and it'll be great. We're going to honor a great man, and I think he should be in the history books. He also, James Reese Europe, also started the Clef Club in New York. And he, along with a couple, Irene and Vernon Castle, they created some of the early jazz dances, the cakewalk and the foxtrot and all those dances that we hear about. They started that. And James Reese Europe, he was so innovative because at that time, you know, things were very hard for black people in America, and especially for black musicians. So they had a club where you could go, if you didn't have money, you can go there and get something to eat. And they would also have networking. Okay, so-and-so's looking for a trumpet player at this orchestra. So-and-so's looking for a saxophone player. So-and-so needs a drummer. Oh, if you play for this group, make sure they pay you $1.50, not $1.25. If you play, if you're going on tour, if you're going down south, because traveling again was very difficult during that time. But if you go down south and you need a place to stay, go to Charlie so and so. He's on that side. He was incredible man, James Reese Europe, and played several instruments, and also was the first time that he brought and incorporated the Latin tinge, because he had many drummers in his orchestra who were from Puerto Rico. So it was very interesting. But please, if you can find out, do some research. James Reese Europe, incredible individual, and we're going to honor him on Thursday. So we're going to close out with thank you so much. We're going to close out with a song called Southern Rendezvous. It's in 7, and it was part of a suite that I composed for Solomon Northup. This was a book, of course, I read his book, 12 Years a Slave, and I composed a suite dedicated to him, and this was way before they made the movie. In 2010, they made the movie, which won an Oscar for Best Picture. And when I heard they were making the movie, I had friends said, man, we got to get your music in the film, and then you become famous and move to Hollywood and start writing for films. But they already had their musical composer. But it's okay, and I'm really happy that I had a chance to do this suite. And I'll tell you this, Solomon Northup, in his book, he talked about the power of music, and it's because he played the violin, it's why he survived. Can you imagine somebody taking you from this room and taking you out of here and taking you down to Louisiana and selling you into slavery? And you're a slave now for 12 years. Most of us wouldn't survive. We would, we would take our life. It would just be so horrific. But he said when he felt like that, he would pull out his violin and play. And the tones of that violin soothed his heart and gave him hope. And of course, the ending was a very good ending because he was eventually freed and he was returned to his family up in Saratoga, upstate New York. So we're going to play that for you now, Southern Rendezvous. Thank you very much, Mr. Greg Murphy. Thank you very much to Dr. Mark Churchland and the Zuckerman Institute at Columbia, the National Jazz Museum of Harlem, Kent, who's also been very, very helpful to put this all together for us. And we're very happy that you came. And also, never give up hope. And the reason I'm saying that, I'm so thrilled because check this out. You're not going to believe this. I have a new CD that was recorded 22 years ago, and it never came out until today. Never give up hope. Never give up. 22 years. 22 years. I was 10 years old. 22 years ago. But it's a beautiful record. It's all ballads and songs of love and romance. Standards, a couple originals featuring Stephon Harris on vibraphone, and there's a guarantee with this CD. If you put this CD on, and you are with your significant other, sparks are gonna fly in 5 minutes, or you get your money back. Thank you so much. You're a wonderful audience.
Give it up for TK Blue. Take care, Blue, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great evening. Get home.
Thank you so much, and please, come out and support Jazzmobile. They're gonna start July 5th. All right, Grant's Tomb in Marcus Garvey Park. All right, Price is Right. It's free. God bless you all.